Welcome back to Dis Media, a startup story, the podcast where I take you along our journey of starting Dis Media from the ground up. You get to hear all about our challenges and accomplishments as we either grow Dis Media or go bust. Either way, you're going to have a front row seat to hear it all. And along the way, we're going to have some special guests who share with us their wisdom and insights and what helped them along their startup journey to success. So get ready as we get into it and try to help those get better at what they do. Welcome back, everybody, to Dis Media, a startup story. This is the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of starting a business from the ground up. And along the way, I've been chronicling the journey of Dis Media. In the intro, we talk about the fact that we're going to bring on special guests from time to time to talk about their journey and what it takes to start a business, because it's tough. It's a challenge and it's a slog, and it's sometimes such a slog that you don't feel like doing it anymore, but then something happens and you're inspired again and you're back at it and loving it. All of those emotions and things that go into it. Today, I am happy to be joined by Perry Sheraw. Perry, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing, Ben?
I am doing fantastic. So before we got started here, Perry and I were just catching up. She's filling me in on her background. Perry is a marketing automation specialist and really has built a career around that. And I think, what is interesting to me about this topic is that I think for a while there, maybe a moment in time, people kind of thought that email was dead, that nobody was checking email. It was a terrible way to market. But then you hear guys like Gary Vaynerchuk say email is underrated and it's still a fantastic medium and a great way to reach people. And Perry, you've been doing this for a little bit now. One of the things that I think was really fascinating about your background was that you kind of started doing this work really before we had things like Salesforce or CRM tools that really make it much more efficient and easy these days. So I would love to get into all of that. But first, let's learn a little bit about you. One of the things that you started off talking about was that you are here with us today from the U.S. Virgin Islands.
That's right. I've lived on St. Croix for 25 years and built a career from here, and been able to run nationwide campaigns and work for agencies across the country. I just love it down here and coming to you from St. Croix.
That is amazing. So, one of the things that we try to do is provide people at all levels of business. I always like our moniker is helping managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do. Mm-hmm. And part of that is a little bit of telling the story of how Perry got to where she is today. Like when you reflect back on the journey, where did it start? What got you interested in this path that you took? And, some of the successes along the way. So let's start there. Let's go back to the beginning of getting into things, because I think you mentioned that you started out in print journalism.
I did. I started in print journalism. I was a literature major, and I took a story at the school newspaper in college at University of Kentucky, and it just took off from there. I spent several years at the Cincinnati Enquirer. During college, I worked for the Lexington Herald-Leader in Kentucky as a night police reporter. And so I'd drive around, before the internet with a scanner and my Ford Escort and go to crime scenes. And, it was really interesting. And especially if I got to the crime scene before the police did, which was a little scary, but I was fearless then. So that was really fantastic training for pretty much anything, and
I would imagine so.
And so, just being inquisitive and learning fast and writing fast, all of that It was kind of a natural segue for me after a brief hiatus. When I moved to the Virgin Islands, I was a scuba instructor and boat captain for a couple of years, and then got back into the corporate world working for a nationwide mergers and acquisitions firm. And I ended up being the right hand to the CEO and launching marketing for 4 different cities. A week, we would present mergers and acquisitions presentations to small business owners. I handled the marketing, the IT, and the CRM for that, and ended up really covering all points of the customer journey and managing all points of the customer journey. But we had something called Sage Sales Logics at the time. And that was kind of a digital Rolodex on steroids. And I ended up building that into something that integrated with our email deployment system. So I kind of built a predecessor mini HubSpot type tool to try and put everything under one umbrella, and just fell in love with the idea of solving problems in that corporate setting to allow seamless digital communication, for integrating telephony in with CRM, making sure that the person on the phone understood where the person they were talking to, so the rep understood where the prospective client was in our journey. How much did they know about us, and so on.
That's, because I'm thinking back, out of curiosity. So, about what time period was this that you're working with some of these early tools?
It was 2000 to 2000. It was around 2001. I
Okay.
remember walking in, and a lot of the mergers and acquisitions, it was kind of a very Glengarry Glen Ross kind of sales team. And a lot of them were probably 60-plus-year-old men. And I was in my early 30s. And I can remember saying, I really think this email thing's going to stick.
Well, and back then, you kind of looked forward to your email. We hadn't quite got to the point where we are today, where, hundreds of unread messages and
Yeah.
tools that are sorting your email into various places. Back then, you kind of looked forward to checking your email.
Hmm.
For a lot of businesses that think about marketing through email, social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook have become such the outreach mechanism that people use to try and reach customers.
Hmm.
And you know, at Dis Media, the Daily Pitch, we have a weekly newsletter that goes out. We use an email system to just kind of reach people. And we're not necessarily selling per se,
Hmm.
but if you are a small business, what are some things that you need to kind of think about if you're going to try and do a little bit more? I don't want to call it direct marketing, but I guess it's kind of a captured audience through email.
Right. I mean, I view email as the closer. Email typically, for many social media, some of the more sexy channels will bring contacts in and bring prospects in. But very, very often, I mean, email year after year has a 38-to-1 ROI for dollars spent on marketing dollars. And it is always, I mean, in study after study, the leading closer, last touch attribution channel for companies consistently across all verticals. And so, one thing that I think a lot of people forget, barring all of that, is that email will help you get more mileage out of your ad dollars by nurturing those folks that maybe would just pop on. Email and lead capture are just essential to ensure that those folks that maybe are just popping onto your site for a quick look, because everything's so temporary with a lot of the other channels, they're taking a quick look, they're going to forget who you are. If you can possibly capture that email and then nurture them in a responsible way, in a respectful way, and in as conversational a way as possible, then those folks will, it's just the best way to stay top of mind. If an algorithm decides that they're not going to present what you're sharing on social media to them anymore. If you're not spending a lot of money for retargeting through paid advertising, or if you are, I mean, email is just a constant. And even though they say pretty much every year that email is dying or is dead, now, I mean, what will happen? I think what's really interesting, what will happen with some of the very young folks? Are they going to, finally kick the bucket with that, younger generation? Like, I have a 16-year-old. I don't know, is she going to be checking her email in 10 years? I think maybe so, because so many of the accounts are tied to email, and Google continues to produce studies that show people check their emails up to 4-6 times a day. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a utility at this point. And if you can behave in a way that is helpful in email communications, and you can present your pitch or yourself in a way that is respectful and conversational, I think that you will find that email delivers the closing touch point for you in many cases. And one other important thing to note for small business people in general is that if you are going to a trade show, if you are going to do any kind of advertising, you need to be extremely certain that you are open for business when it comes to email, because otherwise that's so fleeting. All of these connections you're making can be so fleeting if you're not capturing that email and capturing a way to communicate with them beyond social media, beyond everything else, because a lot of those other channels, you've got to be sure, are they Instagram people? Are they TikTok people? Are they, you're covering all of these different bases that you can cover in a lot of cases with one email.
That's very true. And, I thinking about the process of email and how it's changed. So, like back in the early days when you were first starting
Mm-hmm.
this, and well, it's funny because one of the things I mentioned recently was I had built a social media metrics dashboard for my website and put it out there for people to just kind of, view and see our social media metrics. I mentioned that it's a little more difficult now, post, I would say, around 2015, 2016, everybody started to really lock things down because they realized there was a tremendous amount of information that you can get from these social media tools, and that
Right.
maybe we shouldn't be grabbing so much.
Right.
Or like in the Wild West
Yeah.
days, you could just like spam people like crazy and get,
Mhm.
but now we've got a lot of tools and control.
Mhm.
Um, what were some of the, early days of putting this stuff together, and how crazy was it?
Well, one of my favorite things was, I don't know how many bosses I had who would just basically throw a purchase list at me and say, "Hey, my sister's cousin's brother had this list of email addresses. Let's just see if any of those people are business owners who might be interested in our products." Oh,
And you just blindly
yeah.
send them an
Yeah.
email.
And, there I am reading everything I can get my hands on about best practices and knowing that is absolutely the worst thing to do. Right. Then, now, anytime. Well, one time we do it because no matter what I was saying, just try it, just try it, just try it. And so, no matter what I'm saying, I wasn't making the decision. Shut down not only our email deployment, shut it down. And I mean, we're talking, we had 2 million contacts in our
Oh my god.
database. Yeah. Shut that down. This list of like 15,000, right? Shut that down. Shut down our website because an abuse complaint was made to GoDaddy where our website was hosted, and, just basically cost the company tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, for a couple of
Just
days while
try it.
I begged them to reinstitute us, and it was like, see, I told you that wasn't a good idea. And, that was not as common. And if you were set up to, well, it wasn't so common in that time for those abuse complaints to shut entire systems down like that. But it definitely is more commonplace now for those abuse complaints to have a really negative impact on your reputation. I think the bottom line is, if you decide to do something like that, you have to be prepared to play more of the cold email game I mean, companies still do it. We all still get those emails that we didn't sign up for, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so companies still do that, but they are definitely using different servers and a lot of ways that you can go about that cold outreach that is not your typical, let's send it through your marketing channel.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think about the process I had to go through when I set up our mailer service. And you have to put a little bit of script on your domain side so that they know that you're coming from a legitimate place. You got to give people the opt-out opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Some require that you do double opt-in verification now. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, there's a lot of regulation around it, but because, historically there's been some abuse and, the scams are there all the
Oh,
time.
yeah, the scams. And, a lot of companies recently had a big wake up call about a year ago in July when Yahoo and Google implemented more domain verification requirements. And a lot of people didn't really understand how to do that. So, with small businesses, especially, even if you're using a tool like a Klaviyo or a HubSpot, understanding how to manage your domain is really important. A lot of times your host will help you with that, your web host. They'll walk you through it. Bluehost, for example, I know they do a great job with, just phone support, walking you through that sort of thing. And so it's really important to make sure that your domain is set up properly. And that's another thing where email professionals can help you optimize just the setup, right? If you feel like you can send your own emails, great. But hiring an email professional to help you be primed for the best possible deliverability is something that I think small business owners should definitely consider once they get over around 2,000 people on their contact list.
So, when you think about the different industries that are using email, is there one industry that tends to work better than others, or just given your background and your
Mhm.
experience, are you kind of like, hey, this can work for anybody?
Yeah, no, it works. I think it works across all industries. I do med device. I do med device that's e-commerce, med device that is just B2B. I have used it for all industries, really. One thing that I love that and the reason I love it is just simply the clean closed loop sales reporting that you get from it is e-commerce using something like Shopify and Klaviyo, where you really have all of the data, which is something emails always struggled with. We don't have the same kind of analytics, the same kind of clear line to conversion that some channels can have. Eh, because email can be a little more exploratory, I believe, and it can be a slower close, and it can also be something that is closing off of other channel activities. So, depending on how the attribution is set up, once Klaviyo and Shopify came along, then you really got to start seeing the impact of email, whether it was in abandoned cart or even the welcome series. I mean, some people's welcome series amount to about 20% of their overall sales. So,
All right, so you hit me there with some terminology. Welcome series. What is
yeah.
that for layman like me?
Right. So you go to, whether you're in B2B, B2C, e-commerce, whatever you're doing, you want to, and I view I view all of this as one good conversation. If you go to a cocktail party and all you do when you talk to somebody is say the same thing over and over again, they're going to walk away from you, right? So with email, what you want to do is make sure that you're doing a proper conversation with someone. You're introducing yourself. So, you're finding out a way to communicate with them. That's basically, the beginning of the introduction. And then you're telling them a little bit about yourself, maybe during that welcome series, which could be 1, 2, 3 touch points that include maybe a little SMS. You're asking them a few questions too, or you're driving them to some content to see if that's something they might be interested in. So you're starting the conversation with the welcome series, which hopefully is going to be 3 or more touch points. And then you're keeping track because you're engaging with them, because hopefully they're clicking. That's helping your email reputation. That's helping them get to know you. And then you're going to start to keep track of the various activities activities that they have and trigger other automated emails from there. And those automated emails give you a much better chance of success communicating through email because they're behavior triggered.
Okay. So, God, this is gonna get interesting
Yeah.
because um, I'm familiar with a lot of uh, approaches, I guess we would say,
Hmm.
to email and doing this because, as I mentioned, we have a newsletter that we send out once a week. So I'm going to put myself in my chair, which is very much not the expert when it comes to, you're talking about triggers and automatic emails and all of these things. And I'm like, as a small business owner,
Uh-huh.
um, and let's say you have no idea about this stuff,
Yeah.
right? Where do you start and how do you get over that fear? Because I've heard this even from others that I've spoken to about email marketing
Yeah.
campaigns. I don't want to annoy people.
No.
I don't want to bother
Right.
people. So, how do you balance those welcome emails that you
Hmm.
mentioned with the automated follow
Hmm.
ups and not scare people away from, your business?
Absolutely. It's the best question, right? You don't want to annoy people. First of all, your content should always come from a place of being helpful, right? And so that's a great start. If you're wondering where to start because you have a blank slate, get one welcome email out there, and that would be in response to whatever their initial engagement is where you capture their email. If you capture an email, there should be a response. It's part of the conversation. It's expected, right? Maybe they engage with it, maybe they don't. That's why down the road you might add a couple more email touch points at that point. But start with one email response that is thanking them and that is helpful, not annoying. That gives them something in their inbox. Let's say that they downloaded an ebook, or signed up for more information about a course that you're offering. That gives them one email touch point that can stay in their email and they can refer back to, which people over all of these years, people still convert off emails that they've received weeks or months ago. It still happens all the time. So the email often, I mean, there are some people who delete everything in their inbox, but the email often will sit in an inbox. Most people don't clean their email inbox because there's no
Yeah.
restrictions on space anymore. You
Right.
know,
Guilty.
I mean, let's say I've got better things to do, right? And plus, I can refer back. I know it's always sitting there. It's sort of like my little Rolodex now. I can refer back to what was that company that had that course I liked? Okay, yeah, let me search these keywords in my email, and there it is. And then I convert off of it. And so, getting that initial, if you have a blank slate, get a welcome email out there. And then on your forms, whatever your lead capture forms are, make sure you capture a first name and an email. And then once you have a first name and an email, then you can start to communicate maybe your weekly newsletters. And as you go down the path of these weekly newsletters happening, maybe you don't have other automations to start with. If you're e-commerce, you definitely should, because you should move over into abandoned cart, because that is a huge revenue driver. It's definitely expected, and there are multiple touch points. And the reason there's multiple touch points is how many emails do you get that you don't open? But then you might open the third one that a company sent you. So I think that people are kind of self-managing the annoyance at this point, as long as the frequency isn't just super spammy, meaning I know some companies send you 6, 7 email, Timu or, that it's just, I
Right.
wish I'd never signed up
Yeah.
for that. They're sending me and I'm on 8 different lists all of a sudden of theirs. So, don't be like that. Don't be Timu. So, but otherwise, I think that casual cadence of 7 to 10 days between touch points for a smaller scale business is totally expected and not annoying.
Yeah, that was I was going to ask you, like, what is that threshold? And I would imagine if you have an abandoned cart trigger
Mhm.
that a little bit more frequently,
Yes.
maybe for the first couple weeks,
Hmm.
and then you know give it about I don't know. I mean, it's It's so interesting. There, what I find fascinating about this stuff is that it's a mix of technology and
Right.
psychology, because you're ultimately trying to get people to make that purchase decision.
Hmm.
And what is that right mix of triggers that allow for
Hmm.
that?
And I have lots of data to talk about that and to support the choices behind that. And what we find is that the abandoned cart, you've got one within an hour, one within 24 hours, a third one within 48 hours. And then we add a little secret sauce kind of aspect to this is we've tested in across multiple companies, we've tested adding a fourth abandoned cart. And it's surprising that the fourth abandoned cart pretty much doubles the revenue of the third abandoned cart email.
Wow,
Yeah.
real
Who would
That's
think? I
crazy.
mean, it does. And we study the reports from, large companies like Litmus, even Salesforce, they'll publish annual findings from these types of emails. Klaviyo will publish things like that as well. And they're looking at vast amounts of data now. And so just staying in tune with that is something that we try and do. And we test it. We test all the time. We're always testing.
Out of curiosity, so those who may not be familiar, when you run campaigns, there's usually a open rate, there's a click rate,
Mhm.
there's a click through, or click through open rate, I think is what they call it. It's like CTOR and CTR and all of these crazy abbreviations for this stuff.
Mhm.
So, what is an effective campaign? Like, what would you expect to see for an open rate and a click through rate?
Yeah, for something that where someone has joined your list, where they are expecting email from you or they've done business with you in a way that provided an email, I would expect to see somewhere above 30% open rate. And it can be even higher if someone's more engaged, but on average I would expect to see 30% open rate. Click rate, you want to see above 3%. And if your content is super engaging, I mean, that can go much higher. Click through rate should be in the teens for sure. And
Got it.
unsubscribes under 1%, as low as possible. But unsubscribes aren't bad. Unsubscribes keep your list clean as long as you're not abusing the cadence, you know, then you're being annoying. But unsubscribes, somebody could sign up for something of yours, learn a little bit more about it, decide that's not really interesting to them and move on. Now, if you're sending them 4 emails a week, that's probably why they unsubscribed. But, if you're just sending them a helpful email here and there or triggering behavior based emails because they have interacted with your brand, then unsubscribes are probably more indicative of they're just not interested and they're not really that into you.
So when you're sending an email, because I try, with our own newsletter, I try different days,
Mhm.
different times of day. I'm looking here at my own data just to, kind of refresh my brain. So, our open rate is high 30s into the
Good.
40s, which is good, but our CTOR, like 10, 11%, click rate is 4.5%, 5%. Not bad,
Mhm.
but what would be a recommendation to like bring some people up, like people who are looking at their data? What are some things that, or strategies that kind of help with that?
Yeah. So send times historically Tuesday 10 a.m. through Thursday 10 a.m., like basically 10 to 2, Tuesday through Thursday. If you don't know where to start, those are typically really good baselines to start with. And so, try and hit in between there, and then you could start testing with, hey, I wonder if people are looking into this more on Saturday mornings, so you can start to slide in some different, I wonder if they're maybe going to look at this after dinner on a Wednesday and try an 8 o'clock send, PM, depending on what your industry is. And then as far as increasing the open rate and the click-through rate and the click rate, the best thing to do is to start to test. Most systems will provide you right out of the box an easy way to A B test. Start
Mhm.
with subject lines. If you want to drive up your subject line, you're going to A/B test that. One of the nice kind of fast and practical tips is if you're not already coming up with pre-header text, if you're not coming up or preview text, different systems call it different things, but it's basically the second line and the line that you would see inside the inbox. You'll see the from, the subject, then you'll see
Yeah.
the pre-header text that gives you the gist of the email. That's really important real estate to make sure that you're maximizing the value of. And so what I'll do is come up with what I consider a bang up subject line. And then I'll come up with my second favorite subject line will be my pre-header text or my preview text. And then for A/B testing, I'll swap them and I'll just test both as subject lines. So I'm trying to kind of make that simple. We can get a lot more
Yeah.
complicated in that.
I'm sure we did.
but, but I try that. The other really important thing for people to remember is test one thing at a time. I think people get excited and forget, and they'll be like, well, I'm going to try this CTA, this subject line, and this, different hero image. You just want to test one thing at a time, keep it simple.
I speaking from what we send out, the thing that I have found that kind of improved some of the open rate was just putting somebody's
Oh,
name
yeah.
in the subject
Yep.
line.
Yep.
It's like, hey, so and so, here's, and then continuing on with your subject line has been somewhat effective.
Mhm.
Um, the thing that is a little bit different for us than probably maybe others who are listening to this, who have products that they're selling, things that they're trying to move. What are some of those things that people tend to look for if you're selling something? Like, and I as I think about this, I'm thinking about what you mentioned earlier, working for an organization that has huge lists.
Mhm.
So I guess a little bit of both. Like, how do you strategize your email if you're a smaller organization versus a larger organization? Like, are there different strategies that work better for size of email list or things that you're trying to move?
Yeah, if you're a smaller organization, on one of your other podcasts, you were talking about being authentic. As a
Yeah.
smaller organization, you can really maximize the value of being authentic and having a very clear voice and tone and personable tone and adding in the personalization. And it goes way beyond first name, right? Personalization goes deep down into segments, identifying through data. I don't want to overcomplicate it, right? But if you have the ability, especially if you're a smaller organization, and you can identify the fact that this group of people expressed interest in these three topics that were very similar. And then you can start to segment those folks and send them, at least here and there, a few things that are really focused on that one topic, as opposed to just sending what they call a kind of batch and blast to your entire list. And so as you start to really, I think the simplest way to look at it is that you're starting to get to know your audience and you're starting to understand that this part of your audience might like to hear more about one subject, whereas this part of your audience might want to hear more about another subject. And the more you do that, the more it pays off. And that's just personalization. It's sort of like if you look at it from kind of even a social media or an ad perspective, I mean, your target market or your target audience for specific ad content, there's a lot of granular tools to control what you're showing to, not as much as there used to be, as you were mentioning earlier, but what you're showing to certain audiences. And the same is true with email because they're telling you what they're interested in by their engagement.
So, as you've kind of been in this industry
Mhm.
and have seen it really grow and evolve to what it is today, I mean, I think what's kind of nice when you've been part of an industry for a while is that you've been able to see it transition
Mhm.
into today, right? And on the surface, we've got AI
Mhm.
that is coming into play with a lot of things, and everybody's trying to find where AI fits
Mhm.
with their. What are some of the things that you're seeing that are interesting to you? Like the stuff that's really taking you to a place where you like, you're either excited or maybe a little bit scared
Mhm.
about what's going on.
Yeah, I'm really excited about AI. I mean, I feel like AI is so empowering and allowing, especially email marketers who and smaller business owners who maybe aren't the best data analyst, to work with some of their data and really analyze and add tagging and segmentation and start to research do deeper research on topics, especially for creating content for emails. Do deeper research on topics and provide more helpful information based on some of the research that they're doing. So I think that for me, I know this may not it may not resonate with everyone, but for me, I feel like doing marketing automation since the early 2000s, I've been uh, participating in the evolution of AI since then. Whether it was send time optimization and having the platform analyze all of the data for when my people are opening emails to tell me when the best time to send to each of them is. Some of those tools, or whether it was, just being able to insert dynamic content based on past behaviors and building out those automations. So you've kind of got a bit of AI working in the background on all of that. And so I'm just excited to see where it's going to evolve to. What scares me about AI, honestly, is just that it's going to evolve into search again, and it's going to be all paid content, that's basically you can't find an answer to your question because it's all
Of all the
it's all
sponsored activity.
sponsored, yeah. I just love the rawness of it right now.
Yeah, it's I've been using AI to some extent for like the last 2
Mhm,
years, and I pretty much use it every day,
mhm,
for something. Now I find that I use it a lot more, to your point, with search.
mhm,
And it's interesting to see its evolution,
mhm.
to see where it has come from. And one of the things I teach, and what I just had a conversation with students recently about how they're using AI.
Mhm.
And I was teasing them because I was like, "You guys are terrible. Like, you're not even using it right." This is a tool where you can get an idea and you can take our discussion questions and you can work with them. I said, to be a good writer, or actually, to be a good editor,
Mhm,
you have to be a good writer.
mhm.
And the more you write, the better editor you become.
Yeah,
But if you allow a machine to do all of your writing for you, and you're not really doing any of the thinking around the writing and the revisions and editing things and rereading stuff, if you're not doing that,
mhm.
you're missing out on what it takes to be a good editor. And I even see it in corporations. I've seen news broadcasts that are putting up people's social media posts, and I'm like, that's AI.
Yeah,
Like, I know it. Like, I
yeah,
can tell in the cadence of the language of the post that it's AI.
yeah,
But I fear that we're going to get to a point where people are not doing good editing when it comes to creating emails
yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. And as a writer, I think about my kids, and they're 16 and 18, and they just really are very heavily dependent on all of the tools for AI, and it started with spell check. I mean,
Mhm.
and I wonder, I think I've always been kind of so pro technology that I feel like, I was one of the people saying, well, I mean, I guess people don't need to spell anymore because they've got spell check. So I'm not going to be super worried about that as a mom. Whereas, I feel like to me, I'm always drawn more toward learn to master the tool. Learn to master the tool. And to your point, though, you have to commit to owning what you create from the tool. And if you're not editing it and you're not paying attention and you're not learning the skills you need to be a good editor, then, you're shortchanging yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, it takes away, I don't know, for me, it takes away from the fun of it.
Mhm.
And again, I think that you can use AI to be conversational, to dive into things, to reveal new bits of information, but then you've got to take that and kind of make it your own.
Yeah.
And that I think is a step that we're not quite getting from folks yet.
Yeah, and it's can be
Um,
overwhelming, right? I mean, how many chats do you have that you haven't even read all of it? And, in ChatGPT, it's just produced all of this volume.
yeah,
And it's just like, you're not reading it. You're not using it.
yeah. It's interesting because one of the tells that one of I think this is pretty well circulated now, like the M dash.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
ChatGPT loves M dashes, and most people don't write using M
That's right.
dashes.
What's so crazy is one of my staff members said, this client keeps running everything I'm producing through ChatGPT and coming back with all these M dashes. And she's
Yeah,
like, there's such minor tweaks that ChatGPT is, it's like, but it just came up today, this morning, talking about how I know it's ChatGPT because it's all these M dashes. And, I've spent all this time on the copy and I'm making sure it's optimized for what we're trying to do and conversion focused. And then I'm getting this like, obviously chat GPT'd, like optimized copy back instead of just saying, here, tweak this or tweak that. So, and that,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
and what's I'm just going to kind of read into it. I imagine what's happening is that you have somebody sending copy, and then the recipient says, I don't want to. This copy just pastes. Oh, okay, that's what I should think. Let me just send that back.
yeah, right, right.
And you hope that's not the way it is, but I suspect that is.
Yeah,
It's interesting. Another thing that I noticed too with people who lean on this tool is all of a sudden Ergo and IE have reintroduced themselves into the common.
right.
I've been teaching for 20
Mhm.
years, and I've told my students this. I said either somehow between just after COVID to now, people became amazing
Right.
writers, right? Or and again, I've got 20 years of experience to kind
Mhm.
of base this on.
Totally.
Like I know what student writing looks
Yeah,
like versus what it looks like now.
yeah.
It's just an evolution of things. So, my point to all of this is I hope that, and I chat you AI great tools, but I hope it doesn't just sterilize all of the language
Right?
around everything to the point where it's just doesn't become interesting or engaging to read.
Yeah,
And that's kind of the point of emails is
right.
that it's supposed to draw you in.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we will use what we'll do sometimes with AI is use it to help us spin up a longer list of subject lines. For example, add a little more punch to this, give us a few different word choice options and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we find that super helpful. But yeah, if we just start at some point, we're just going to start seeing all of the same copy out there. But you had a little bit of that, when you get an email from somebody for an abandoned cart and it says the exact same thing across 7 brands, you're seeing a little bit of that already anyway. And so, it really the onus is on the brand to make sure that their copy is engaging and that they're not just cutting and pasting from ChatGPT. And hopefully your students will focus on writing enough so that when they're out there running their company's email, they're not doing it then because they can't write anymore.
Yeah, well, we're trying to break some of that.
Yeah.
So I purposely get them to respond to discussion
Uh-huh.
questions so that we kind of analyze this stuff and,
Mhm.
and get better at it.
Right.
So let me ask you this: if thinking about all of the tools that are out
Mhm.
there, right? So if you think about small business, medium business, mega corporations,
Mhm.
if you're a small business, what are some of your favorite tools people should be looking at that are kind of also affordable for small? Because like HubSpot can get a little
Oh, yeah.
pricey,
Yeah.
But if you don't have a HubSpot budget,
Hmm.
where might you start? Like, what are some good things to start off with small?
Yeah, I mean, if you're e-commerce, you really need to be looking at Klaviyo, and if you have a small list, it's going to be very affordable, and then you can scale out from there. Probably the most common, very low budget, not, very affordable, I guess, option would be more of a Zoho CRM, coupling that with something like maybe MailChimp, but MailChimp has gotten a little bit more pricey. It's not one of my all-time favorites. I kind of lean a little bit more toward Constant Contact for some of the very small business activities, but as soon as you can get into something more like an active campaign, they still are operating on a little bit more of a level of affordability, but they have a very robust automation offering. And so you can
Okay.
stay from very small to maybe 5x and not have to, think about moving over to HubSpot or migrating for quite a long time. You can do so much with Active Campaign at a lower budget. And then HubSpot for sure. I love that HubSpot recently became HIPAA compliant. That gave people an option beyond Salesforce and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Salesforce is just so complicated. It's
You're not the first I've heard that from. There are definitely people who are in the HubSpot camp
Mhm.
and love it over Salesforce.
Yeah. Salesforce is good if you can have a team of at least 2 or 3 Salesforce administrators. But until you get to that, I used to, coming out of the world I came up in, I just couldn't wait to own Salesforce. It was like the pinnacle, and I couldn't wait to own it. I got it, and I never did anything with it because it was so and I was a small business, right? Doing it for myself. And it was so overly complex. And I'd worked with so many systems that weren't, that I was just like, no, I'll just go over here and do it on this one because I can do everything I need to do in such a short period of time compared to the time investment to do this one small thing in Salesforce. So
It's kind of like SAP. Well, it's probably not as bad as
yeah.
SAP, but like SAP is another one of those like mega systems
Hmm.
that is so
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah, so intense. It's so sophisticated. You can do so much with it, but most companies don't need to do that much with it. They need to do the
Yeah.
basics, and HubSpot more than covers the basics. Active Campaign covers the basics, and just to send emails, you got your Constant Contact, your MailChimp. But if you're doing anything e-commerce, definitely Klaviyo. And then, there's some other really good ones like ConvertKit. That one offers a nice set of options as well.
Very cool. Yeah,
What are you using? Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
I use no, not at all. I was just about to tell you.
Mhm.
So we use MailerLite.
Yeah.
And I use it because it integrates well in our website. I built our website's WordPress site, but I use Elementor for
Yeah.
it, and it's got integrations with Elementor. So
Mhm.
when you're building, as you scale, you kind of go for what works.
Mhm.
And to the point you were just making, it's like you kind of start with these tools that they're effective,
Yeah.
and for even from an affordability standpoint, and that's part of what we've done here with just the daily pitch is we try to utilize things that help people just get started,
Yeah.
right, and just get moving. And as we grow, we'll scale, we'll upgrade tools and things
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
you know, for what we do, it's great. I loved the whole what you were talking about, like if people open and they haven't taken action in doing these resends of emails. I would love to, but then at the same time, I have to say, it's balancing all of this time and
Yeah.
activities. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how long would it take to set something like that?
Well, if it comes to automation, let's say that you've got a basic Active Campaign account. You build an email and you make minor adjustments. You clone that email, you make minor adjustments. You pop it into an automation, which is drag and drop. It's very straightforward. And then you have a yes, no branch right underneath it. And again, it's drag and drop. These are all very visual tools, not coding or anything like that. And then, if this is opened within 3 days, then exit the automation. If it's not, resend, and maybe you switch your pre-header text with your subject line so it doesn't stack in the inbox. And then you've given a second touch to that, a second opportunity for that person to see your email. And the reason you do it is not because you want to harass them. It's because a lot of times you know how many emails you get. And,
Oh yeah.
you're not, everybody isn't seeing it. It's already pushed down by the, and so I guess you're kind of part of the problem, but it's part of the way to be seen.
Yeah, and it's funny. That is a lesson that we learned early on just with our social media posts.
Mhm.
A lot of people kind of approach it like, okay, I made a post and then on to the next one.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of stuff in LinkedIn
Mhm.
because, we tend to cultivate that kind of audience.
Mhm.
And what I learned early on was I've got to reserve up. Like I might publish an article and gets a little bit of traction, but then like the third or fourth time somebody sees it, it like gets many more views, and
Right.
it's so it's I I don't know enough about the algorithm or the psychology that makes a person, maybe it's just because they saw it again.
Mhm.
I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
you can't have that approach of, well, I put it out there.
Yeah.
There you go. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes you got to put things out more than once.
Right. The one and done approach doesn't work because how many times is someone looking? I mean, right now I am not multitasking, you know, but how often am I multitasking when I'm scrolling through LinkedIn or scrolling through any of those channels, even glancing at my emails? And usually when I'm opening my emails, I'm
Right.
expecting an email, I'm looking for something. And so it's just important to give multiple opportunities to have your content seen. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me ask you this as we kind of work to bring this to a close. What are some of the things that you're working on? And what are, if people are interested in reaching out to you
Mhm.
to help them, like what are some of the things that you can do to help people or to expand what you're doing?
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm working on, which was really interesting listening to your last podcast again, is launching, and this isn't as helpful, but launching my own personal brand, with perrysheraw.com, and really trying to distill some of this 20 years of knowledge into some very helpful blog posts. For example, like, and this is the helpful part, the complete guide to optimizing Klaviyo and Shopify. Or for the last 10 or more years, I've done a 30-point checklist of analyzing which marketing automation platform would be best for which circumstances. So just, some of that content, that's what I'm working on, trying to get all of that published. But then as far as how my company, which is called Duma, that company, marketing automation company, is really focused on working with people in a couple of different ways, either just through setup and helping someone really optimize their setup and then giving them the tools they need to populate their own editorial calendar going forward and identify the right cadence for them, identify best times to send, identify and answer some of these questions that we've been talking about so that you get started on the right path. Make sure your lead capture is really optimized and set up properly. And then the other way that we work with people, and I have clients that I've worked with for over 7 years, which feels a little bit unusual in my industry, but we just really try and retain clients. Our whole business is retention. So we really try and retain clients through really good partnerships and ensure that they are maintaining a really fabulous long-term digital conversation with their prospects. And so it goes from, just not set it and forget it, but set it up and then send you on your way, or, just basically becoming part of your team. And I spent so much time as an in-house marketing professional that I can't help but act like I'm in-house. when I'm working with my clients. I just didn't spend as many years on the agency side to act like an agency. And I've trained
Yeah.
my team to act the same way. So that's kind of how we help people. And we do everything from marketing automation for e-commerce to marketing automation for B2B businesses, to, some really fascinating healthcare organizations and some really uh, pioneering healthcare organizations. We have a great restless leg syndrome med device product that is the only FDA approved non medicinal option out there. It's an actual device, and it is just going gangbusters because nothing like that exists. And so it's super exciting to work with companies like that are really pioneering problem solving for these issues that really plague people. And working with some of the top minds in med device has been one of my favorite things.
That is very interesting. Yeah, one of my board members, Keith, who's been on the podcast a couple times,
Mhm.
he kind of works in that medical space. So I will have to let him know what you're doing for the device side, because he's worked in devices, he's worked in pharmaceutical drugs, and it's his whole world.
Yeah.
But
Please do. And I love, I spent so much time in highly regulated spaces that one of my favorite things to do back when I was a journalist, I would always try and get one big word in each week that would get past the sixth grade level with the requirement with my editors. And so I would kind of make side bets with my other colleagues that I could get this word into the articles, at least one big one every week. And, with highly regulated spaces, I really try and push the envelope of creativity within the regulatory space. And so we love working in that space. I love pushing the envelope, not violating compliance issues or anything like that, but just pushing the envelope and seeing how engaging and how creative we can be within the parameters of those regulations.
well, I mean, and if for nothing else, because you got to mix it up to have a little
That's right.
fun, right?
That's right. And who wants to read anything, too dry, right? Everybody wants to be engaged if they're going to take the time to read it. And so
Absolutely. So folks, if you are interested in reaching out to Perry, he's at
that's
perrysheraw.com,
right.
because want to make sure that people understand Sheraw, Sheraw. So perrysheraw.com, folks, if you want to check out more. I love the fact that you're doing a blog, because that, I have to say, it's one of the things that I've enjoyed about putting the daily pitch together
Mhm.
is just that whole engagement and the people that you reach, and looking at where you're getting audience from.
Mhm.
It's so much fun.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
excited to hear that you're on that path.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Perry, for jumping in, sharing your wisdom, your insights, and all of this stuff. There are people out there I know who probably don't look at email as seriously as you probably should. And, if you've got 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 contacts, and you know that you can reach out to them once a week and 30% or more are going to re-engage in your business, that's some good opportunity to
Mhm.
tap into.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And everybody else, thank you all for checking out Disc Media, a Startup Story. Next week, we will be back with another special guest. So we're looking forward to it. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to Disc Media, a Startup Story. This podcast was produced and edited by Ben Olmos and is a production of Disc Media Corporation. If you're interested in learning more about anything you heard on this episode, please reach out to us at podcast@discmedia.com. You can also get more information about this and other episodes, or information about our guests, by checking out dailypitch.news, our business and insights publication focused on helping managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do.